these violent delights have violent ends. A perfect saying for the dark and evil moments found in the Fallout series, most of them occurring because of you. Yes, you, the one watching the video. You were the one that planted the explosives in people's pockets. You were the one who replaced Rex's mind with another. And you were the one who ultimately blew up the divide. Okay, that last one wasn't actually you, but it did happen. We're going to look at some of the darker and more evil moments in Fallout New Vegas. We already covered Fallout 4 in an earlier video, so if you want to see that, go check it out. And make sure you sub, because Fallout 3 is on the way next. Enjoy. The Courier, our Courier, has a complicated past. We don't know much about it really besides one specific event that takes place in one of the major DLCs, the Lonesome Road, and more specifically the Divide, the location the DLC takes place in. After the nuclear war, Hopeville and Ashton were mostly abandoned. These were two pre-war towns both on the outskirts of the Divide, but a small group managed to survive in the storm-ridden outskirts. Even though the weather was brutal, which was caused by Big Mountain's climate experiments, people held out in the wreckage of the old world buildings. They seemed to draw motivation or maybe even purpose from the old symbols and tech still found around the area. By the 23rd century, the settlement started to grow, thanks in large part to a courier who regularly braved the storms to deliver supplies. That effort gave the people a sense of hope and kept them connected to the outside world. And yes, this would be our protagonist from New Vegas. Over time, this group came to call their home the Divide. The name didn't originally refer to the massive chasm that we'd see later on, but actually to its position between two powers, the NCR to the west and the Mojave settlements to the east, aka Caesar's Legion. These people saw the Divide as a chance to build something new, possibly even better than what either the NCR or Caesar's Legion offered. There was a real belief that this could be the start of a unified nation, one that stood between the flags and brought both sides together under something stronger. But that future never took shape. Instead, the NCR expanded into the region, using the path cleared by the same courier who had once supported the Divide's growth. The area became a key secondary route into the Mojave, helping ease traffic from the main highway, the Long 15. Both the NCR military and its merchants gained from the new path, which gave them better access to the Mojave. This advantage wasn't lost on Caesar. Having two supply lines into the Mojave threatened his campaign, even with all the sabotage that had already taken place before the first battle of the Hoover Dam. In response, he sent Frumentarian assassins to take out the road and cut off the NCR's access, building on the momentum from the destruction of New Canaan and attacks on the western caravans. He was playing chess while the NCR was playing checkers. The same courier who had once helped bring life back to the Divide would also be the reason for its downfall. While the NCR and Legion forces carried out their objectives, the courier arrived with a package from Navarro. It was recovered by the NCR and sent to the Divide in hopes that the locals who lived among old missile silos and ancient tech could be helped to identify it. The NCR didn't realize that the package would set off a chain reaction that would destroy everything. After it was opened, the device inside activated and linked with the old missile systems buried in the region. It triggered launch protocols and override commands, waking up the silos and causing multiple underground warheads to detonate. The resulting quake tore the land apart, changing Hopeville, Ashton, and the surrounding military structures. The explosions kicked up dust and debris into storms, turning the Divide into a crazy dust storm zone that could strip the flesh from your bones. It's hard to label this as something evil that the courier did, or even the NCR really. No one knew that this was going to happen. Tragic really, but not evil. But I wanted to include it regardless because the act killed so many people and it was directly tied to our character. And that's exactly what it did. Many died in the blasts, but not all. Some survivors were twisted by radiation in the storms, their skin constantly torn away and regenerated by radioactive winds. These mutants, who are now called the Marked Men, formed raiding bands using whatever they could salvage to rebuild armor and weapons. One man survived intact, rescued by medical bots who mistook the flag on his back for a US military uniform. He made it out alive, but was mentally wrecked. Even though the Legion lost its task force in the blast, the destruction of the Divide gave them an edge. With the region ruined, NCR lost its backup supply. Route 127 became unusable, and convoys trying to get through were wiped out before reaching Nevada. The NCR couldn't move troops fast enough after their win at the first Battle of Hoover Dam, which gave Caesar the breathing room he needed to retreat and regroup in Arizona. The Divide itself faded from memory, wiped out by storms no one could survive for long. But one man remembered, Ulysses, a former Frumentarius, who spent years walking the wasteland, haunted by what had happened. And then you guys kind of know the story from here on out. The courier and Ulysses have a showdown in the Divide, and it's a tale as old as time that I don't need to rehash. I don't know what we're labeling this video as I'm writing the script, but the divide was an awful event regardless, and it needs to be put here. Some of you might see the NCR as ignorant, and that in itself isn't an excuse for what they did. Maybe you even see the Courier like that. It's crazy to know that this thriving community was obliterated in an instant by nukes again in this series. After already making 2 of these videos, it never occurred to me just how many more nukes and things of that nature had been used after the war. The Wasteland is damn brutal, but I think Bethesda might be the catalyst to most of it. They don't want the Wasteland to recover. We need to keep having Fallout games, of course. So there will always be another setback, another bomb to take care of factions, groups, people, or anyone getting too big. The divide will occur over and over again.
What lottery? The lottery, that's what lottery. Are you stupid? Only lottery that matters. Oh my God, smell that air!
What was the aftermath of the Nipton Lottery? From a 50,000-foot view, the desert town looks like it simply fell victim to raiders, with smoke lining the horizon of homes and rubble and waste where homes once stood. But the truth is far more shady. What happened in Nipton wasn't a battle of raiders versus townfolk. It was a message of sorts. Caesar's legions stormed the town not because Nipton posed an exact threat, but because they wanted to make an example out of it.
I want you to witness the fate of the town of Nipton, to memorize every detail. And then, when you move on, I want you to teach everyone you meet the lesson that Caesar's legion taught here, especially any NCR troops you run across.
The Legion discovered that Nipton had been cooperating with both the NCR and the Powder Gangers, playing both sides for profit. To the Legion, this was treasonous decadence, an insult to their ideals of loyalty and order. Their response? Brutal spectacle. If we go back to the ways of ancient Rome, if you got caught going against the Republic, you were slain. Or worse, tortured. And this was meant to set an example to those who swayed too far from the ideals of their government and what the Romans stood for. Even walking the streets of Nipton, we can see that Caesar took a page directly from the history books in this regard. They, the Legion, held a twisted lottery. Townsfolk were forced to draw lots, and the winners were met with fates arguably worse than death. Some townsfolk were crucified, their bodies nailed to wooden posts to slowly die in agony. And by some, we see that there were plenty who received this fate. Others were burned alive, made into examples of the consequences of degeneracy. Many were enslaved, dragged off in chains to serve the Legion, and one man, just one, was spared. No, not out of mercy, but because his survival served a purpose: to spread the tale of Nipton's fall, to inspire fear. This act wasn't solely about punishment. It was about terror as propaganda.
Yeah! Who won the lottery? I did!
The Legion wanted the Mojave to know what happens when you defy Caesar, or worse, live without his rule. Or even worse, to go against the New World Order or regional order that the Legion is trying to spread. To most moral frameworks, this wasn't justice. Crucifixion and death by fire was a sadistic display of power, where an entire community was destroyed not for what they did, but for the lesson they could teach others. This is what makes Nipton's fate so evil. It wasn't random violence. Nipton's lottery is psychological warfare dressed up as divine retribution. In the cold logic of the Legion, it was necessary. But to the rest of the Wasteland and to most players, Nipton stands to serve that evil isn't always chaos. Evil can be organized. Evil can be systematic. And evil can be in uniform. But compared to the Roman uniforms, the Mojaves are a bit shittier.
Powder ganger? What? I mean, yeah, used to be, sure. But not no more. Powder gang is small time, man. I'm a winner! I won the motherfucking lottery! Bye.
Deep beneath the Mojave, you might find scorpions and their layers, or even gigantic ants waging war. But there's also something more monstrous than either of those. Crammed away from the sun-scorched wasteland lies one of the most morally defying social experiments ever conceived in the Fallout universe: Vault 11. This should come as no surprise since each vault displays some type of sadistic behavior and game, like Jigsaw performing some type of moral social experiment from the movie series.
I want to play a game.
On the surface, the vault functioned like any other where residents simply lived their monotonous day-to-day lives free from worry, with the exception of what was happening to the outside world. But from the day the doors sealed, the residents were given a choice: sacrifice one of their own every year or die. Each year, Vault 11's overseer was to be chosen, and that person would be ceremonially executed in a chamber called the Sacrificial Chamber, If the residents failed to comply, the Vault's AI would supposedly kill everyone. And can you guess the result? An annual blood ritual, a system where death was institutionalized, normalized, and eventually corrupted. A diabolical experiment even by Vault Tech standards. At first, people tried to follow the rules. Classic NPC behavior. But it didn't take long before things got overly political. Power-hungry factions formed, manipulating the voting process so their enemies would be elected overseer, and thus consequentially sent to die. It became a game of survival and betrayal, where the goal wasn't to lead but to avoid being chosen. Morality was tossed aside and out the window. Backstabbing became policy, and eventually murder replaced democracy. This sounds all too familiar. As for the tragedy, the entire test was a total farce. Had the Vault's inhabitants ever refused to make a sacrifice, even once, they would have learned the truth. They would have been set free. The experiment was designed to see if people would uphold human decency even in the face of fear. Vault 11 failed that test catastrophically. So was the evil purely the corporation of Vault Tech's fault? Yes and no. I mean, an entire society simply went with it based on game theory alone. By the time the player finds Vault 11, it's basically a tomb. The last survivors, realizing the truth too late, took their own lives out of guilt, leaving only their recorded confessions behind.
Are we really gonna do this? It's open. We could just leave.
I couldn't. Not after that.
We don't deserve to leave. A shining example. That's what it called us. But we were. We did what we were supposed to. Not by a long shot. Anybody would have done what we did.
You ask me? That's exactly the problem. Now let's get on with this.
I'll go first. Wait. People should know what happened. They could learn from it. If there's anyone out there at all, I hope they never have to find out. Ready, Harry? Yeah. No, wait!
Vault 11 is not just a tale of death, it's a haunting study in how fear, groupthink, and selfishness can corrupt even good people into doing unthinkable evil. What makes Vault 11 so raw isn't just the deaths, it's the bureaucratic nature of the cruelty. Wrapped in rituals and ballots, delivered with a smile by terminal screens with the promise that safety was a mere election away. Evil, at least in this instance, comes in the form of rules and voluntary votes.
Rex starts life as a pre-war canine from Denver, upgraded by the US military with cybernetics and captured and branded by Caesar's Legion, and then eventually traded to the King. By 2281, his organic brain is breaking down, and the followers in Freeside confirm the damage is permanent. The quest Nothing But a Hound Dog sends you to Jacobstown, where Dr. Henry explains that the only fix is a full brain transplant, no therapy, and unfortunately no cybernetic patch. Henry points you toward 3 viable donors. Ray, who is Old Lady Gibson's healthy guard dog at Gibson's scrapyard. They provide a faithful brain that keeps his temperament loyal. Violetta, the chem-sniffing mongrel that roams the fiend camp with Violet. She has the vicious brain. And the third option is Lupa, Caesar's prized warhound inside the fort. And of course with her valiant brain. After the surgery, you'll hear Bark's animations and the companion perks shift to match the new personality, making it clear that the original mind is gone. It's sad in its own way. If you think about it, this is no longer Rex. The brain is the place that holds that being's consciousness. Rex is now one of those 3 dogs just placed into a new body. At least that's what I believe. I don't see how any part of Rex could exist, unless Rex himself has a code or AI built into him that overrides the brain with whatever that code is. But that would just mean that Rex is a machine and not an actual dog. Point is, it's another dark moment in New Vegas. Rex is alive, but is he really? Then we have to look at the other point of view. If you refuse or delay the operation, Rex's degenerative seizures trigger at random, and the ending slide reports he dies within weeks. Choose a transplant and he survives the main story. But his 200-year memory, his fear of hats, hatred of rats, and every scar from Legion fights disappears with his old neurons. Your decision rewires a sentient veteran so he can keep following commands, leaving us with an uncomfortable question of whether prolonging a cyberdog's life is kindness or not. Is it a selfish act to keep the husk of Rex going just so that you don't lose your faithful companion? This one will be quick, but I had to put it in here because the act of doing this is probably one of the more brutal ways of taking people out. And if you're doing it to innocent NPCs, then we're hitting crazy levels of evil. The good old Shady Sands Shuffle. aka reverse pickpocketing explosives into enemies or regular people's pockets. I think a lot of people are surprised to learn that you can do this, even to this day. All you need to do is take any explosive you can find and pickpocket someone and plant that bad boy in there. Then you watch the fireworks. It's not necessarily evil if you're doing it to the right people, or maybe it is. That's up to the philosophers out there. But when you start doing it to NPCs for fun, then it starts to tiptoe that line. I want to reiterate that this doesn't make you evil. I'm writing this from the point of view of a character in the world. Imagine seeing the courier running around the strip and planting grenades in everyone's pockets, and then watching them become red mist. Shit is crazy and definitely evil from that point of view. Or maybe it's just another regular day in New Vegas. Who knows?
What if the key to humanity's survival was found in nature? That was the guiding belief behind Vault 22, one of Vault-Tech's more optimistic experiments, at least on paper. Rather than breaking society down through psychological torture or authoritarian control, or even faulted elections, Vault 22 was meant to build something better and organic. Inside, scientists would explore ways to grow food without sunlight, pushing the boundaries of botany, and ideally ensuring a future where starvation was a thing of the past. But in the Fallout universe, even utopias rot and shit can go sideways real fast. This vault became a greenhouse paradise. Lush, overgrown, and even beautiful. Every surface bloomed with vibrant life. Oxygen levels were so high, the air was practically flammable, and to the untrained eye, it was a success story. But nature wasn't the only thing growing. The vault's researchers began experimenting with fungal spores, splicing them into plants to make them more adaptable and regenerative. But these spores weren't just enhancing vegetation, they were mutating, evolving, and adapting to organic hosts. And the worst part was the scientists saw it happening and still kept going. One by one, Vault residents began falling ill, and not by means of radiation sickness or the flu, but with something stranger. They became sluggish. Residents became paranoid. They slowly became disconnected, and then they vanished, only to reappear later as something else, something no longer human. The spore infection didn't kill off the population, at least not entirely. It rewrote their genetic code. It took over their minds, their bodies, and used them as tools to spread itself as life tends to do. These poor souls became the spore carriers, groaning, shuffling monstrosities covered in fungal growth, blind and thoughtless, but still driven to attack the uninfected in hopes to survive and spread. The Vault had created a form of aggressive, ambulatory plant life, and it was intelligent enough to defend itself. What makes this Vault truly evil isn't just the horror of the outcome, it's the willful blindness that got them there. The scientists prioritized results over ethics. They even suppressed internal reports. They then silenced dissenters so that the catastrophe was hidden. One researcher, Keeley, uncovered logs showing that people begged the overseer to shut the project, but he refused, believing the breakthrough was too important and was for the greater good. In the end, that pride doomed them all. When the infection could no longer be contained, the surviving staff attempted to flee, with some making it to the upper levels. Others locked themselves in rooms, which wasn't a long-term solution, but a short-term survival tactic. But most, they never escaped. The vault doors sealed, and the jungle was left to grow unchecked in the dark. By the time we arrive, Vault 22 is a silent, breathing ruin. The lights flicker as vines crawl across the floors, and deep within, the air is thick with spores and whispers of a hope long lost to fungal overgrowth. The few remaining terminals reveal just how catastrophic the situation became. Entire departments gone overnight, halls filled with gas, and bodies never recovered. Even worse, the threat didn't die within the vault. The fungal strain has started to spread beyond its walls, possibly carried by escaped spores or infected creatures. If left unchecked, Vault 22's solution to world hunger could consume more than just one vault. It could consume the Mojave itself. Vault 22 is a tale of hubris. Sometimes evil blooms quietly in petri dishes and test tubes, watered by good intentions and fertilized by ambition. And by the time anyone notices, it's already too late. At the very start of New Vegas, what are you? If your answer is nothing more than a bullet-riddled corpse in the dirt left to die by a man in a checkered suit and his goons, then you'd be right. And yet somehow you're given a second chance. A quiet doctor named Mitchell patches you up in the town of Goodsprings, a humble desert community full of people who don't owe you a thing, but still risk their safety to help a stranger. It's a place where your story begins, but for some players, it's also where it ends, in flames. If you choose to side with the Powder Gangers, a gang of escaped convicts from the NCR Correctional Facility, you're not only picking a faction, you're choosing to betray the very town that saved your life. The Powder Gangers are chaotic, self-serving criminals who survive through intimidation, robbery, and violence. And when they come knocking on Goodsprings' door, demanding control, you're given a choice. Defend the town with its residents, or help burn it to the ground. Should you choose the latter, you'll personally lead a massacre. You kill townspeople who were never a threat, store owners, farmers, citizens who just wanted to live in peace. People who gave you shelter, medical aid, and a chance to get back on your feet. But you also don't owe these people a damn thing. And that's what makes this moment so evil. It's simply betrayal. The courier isn't responding to aggression. Goodsprings didn't wrong you, they helped you. And in return, you repay their kindness with gunfire and blood. You aren't fighting for survival, you're fighting for thugs who would slit your throat for a box of caps. You become the hammer of destruction on behalf of a gang that blows up caravans and extorts villages. Like this one. Even Ringo, the man the Powder Gangers are hunting, is no hardened soldier. Helping him protect Goodsprings is one of the few early game acts of heroism. But if you side with the gangers, you gun him down too. Right there in the saloon or at the old gas station. This is a quick act of evil and a simple truth. You're killing good people for bad ones. Goodsprings becomes a small outpost of hope, decency, and second chances, erased under the boots of escaped criminals and a courier who traded gratitude for gunpowder.
Let's just get it over with. Welcome to the most skipped segment in the video. I'll try to make it quick because we've all heard this over and over again. Honestly, I was going to leave it out because it's the most overplayed point of view in the series at this point. But it is probably the worst choice that we can make if we go by the majority mindshare. Caesar's Legion runs on organized domination. Every conquered tribe loses its name, language, and customs, replaced by Legion ranks and Latin titles. Men go into frontline service or hard labor. Women become breeding stock or camp workers, barred from any authority. Children are taken early, drilled to obey, and never see their families again. Life has value only when it serves the Legion. Soldiers who fail face decimation, which is 1 in 10 executed at random, just to keep the rest in line. Medical care is withheld from wounded troops to strengthen the ranks. Fear and discipline replace compassion or loyalty. A Legion victory removes the NCR and hands the Mojave to Caesar as a launch pad for more wars. He views expansion as the cure for the old world's decay. If he dies, Legatlantius carries on with even harsher methods, focused purely on conquest and annihilation. Choosing the Legion means aiding crucifixions, terror raids, and public massacres like Nipton, carried out just to send a message. The NCR's faults remain, yet the Legion's rule offers submission enforced by violence. Under their banner, no rebuilding or personal freedom follows. Culture disappears, identities are erased, and the Mojave becomes a place where speaking against the Legion ends in torture or death. Supporting Caesar's Legion commits the region to long-term tyranny. Did I cover enough? Kudos to you if you still see them as a good option. You probably really have to convince yourself. But I'm not here to judge. It's always a fun playthrough to side with the Legion. I just wish they'd included more quests for that side. Jeannie Mae Crawford, the motel owner in Novak, might seem pretty harmless. Polite, helpful, a good old grandma type, one might say. But behind the facade is one of the most cold-blooded acts in the game. She sold Carla Boone, Boone's pregnant wife might I add, to Caesar's Legion for caps. Not because Carla was dangerous or had wronged anyone, but because Jeannie thought she was bad for business. For 1,000 to 1,500 caps, she arranged a secret handoff that ended with Carla being dragged into slavery. Carla wasn't a stranger. She lived in Novak and had a husband in the NCR military. She was known in the community, but none of that mattered. Jeannie saw an opportunity to profit and took it, working directly with the Legion's slavers behind everyone's back. This wasn't a crime of passion, it was a transaction. And they probably had lived there for a good while. The act is straight atrocious behavior. You find out what happened during the quest One for My Baby, when Boone asks you to uncover who sold out his wife. If you go through her safe, you'll find the bill of sale, written proof that she knowingly handed over a pregnant woman to one of the most brutal factions in the wasteland. Jeannie never confesses or shows regret. She doesn't even see it as wrong. The fact that it's optional to expose her or to punish her at all makes it even darker. Boone's revenge is savage, but in my opinion, it's highly justified. Plus, there's really no law in Novak to deal with the situation, so Boone's gotta do what he's gotta do. When you finally learn about all of this and start another playthrough and run into that old Jeannie again, just smiling and being complacent in her little office, it feels sick and wrong. She truly is a monster.
I like long walks in the desert and candlelit metal workshops.
We're playing in a world rebuilt on ash and regret, where factions cling to power like rusted armor, so it's rare to find someone who still believes change is possible. Veronica is one of those rare people. A member of the Brotherhood of Steel, Veronica is unlike her brethren. While most of the Brotherhood remains trapped in the past, hoarding pre-war tech and walling themselves off from the world, Veronica wants to open the door. She dreams of a Brotherhood that helps people and not just machines, that protects the helpless and not just holotapes. She speaks with passion, humor, and unshakable belief that maybe, just maybe, her order can evolve. But in the eyes of the Brotherhood, that's complete heresy. If the courier chooses the darker path, Veronica can be executed by her own people simply for speaking out. And that's exactly what makes this morally incorrect, at least in my opinion. Veronica isn't some radical looking to upend her faction with the intent to destroy the Brotherhood. She's trying to save it and allow it to flourish. She's one of the most loyal, most thoughtful scribes. And hell, she even has a great personality and some funny wit.
I want a dress. Yeah, a good one. Something elegant and classy, you know? But still stylish. Something that's eye-catching and sexy, but also says, don't fuck with me.
But in a culture where dissent equals disloyalty, even questioning tradition is a death sentence. Killing Veronica isn't just the death of a character, it's the death of an ideal that's hard to come by in your travels. You're watching a brilliant, kind-hearted woman who fought for progress, crushed by the very institution she tried to reform. You see hope get stamped out by the cold machinery of the Brotherhood's dogma. Even more appalling is how avoidable it all is. You, the courier, can stand beside her and defend her, help her carve a new path. But if you choose indifference, or worse, compliance, you become complicit in one of the most hush-hush yet cruelest executions in the game. A once vibrant voice extinguished for daring to believe in something better. In the Wasteland, death is a dime a dozen. But this is ideological murder.
You are not free to carry the secret of this bunker's location beyond Hidden Valley, until I'm convinced that you're capable and dependable. To underscore this point, you'll be fitted with an explosive collar. Wander off and it will detonate. Focus on your mission, and you'll be fine.
Speaking of the Hood's isolationism, let's get more into it. In the irradiated skeleton of the old world, survival is a daily miracle. People scrape by with makeshift farms, salvaged rifles, and half-broken water filters. Every tool, every scrap of tech could mean the difference between life and death. But buried away in bunkers of steel and secrecy is a group that would rather let the world burn than share their toys, the Brotherhood of Steel. Founded in the aftermath of the Great War, the Brotherhood began with a noble purpose, to preserve technology and prevent it from ever being misused again. After seeing the horrors of nuclear weapons, they vowed that no one could be trusted with the old world's power. But over time, that mission twisted. What was once about protection became about possession. In New Vegas, the Brotherhood you meet isn't exactly a force for good. They're a dying order, hiding in bunkers and clinging to ancient codes like gospel, all while treating every outsider as a threat, even when those outsiders just want to survive. Instead of using their knowledge to heal, feed, or protect the people of the Mojave, they hoard it. They'd rather go extinct than evolve. But they don't just isolate, they kill. If a scavenger finds a working laser rifle, they'll be hunted down. If a farmer gets a hold of a water purifier, that's Brotherhood property now. Anyone with advanced tech becomes a target, not a beneficiary. They believe the masses are too ignorant to use technology responsibly. But in doing so, they deny the Wasteland its future. And in all fairness, maybe they're right in some ways. I wouldn't expect 90% of the Mojave to use tech other than for selfish reasons or to take power in some way, shape, or form, since most people tend to act in self-interest. But that doesn't make what the Brotherhood is doing any less cruel. What makes their isolationism so evil isn't just the arrogance, it's the hypocrisy. They claim to guard humanity from dangerous relics, yet they themselves march in power armor, wield plasma weapons, and die over data they refuse to use for the greater good. They hoard tech not to uplift, but to control. And their doctrine is so rigid, so inflexible, that they'd rather let their chapter wither away underground than question whether they're actually helping anyone at all. Even within the Brotherhood, there are those like Veronica who plead for change, who see the suffering outside and want to do something about it. But they too are silenced, pushed aside, or even executed. Like I mentioned before, dissent is heresy, and progress is betrayal. In the desert where raiders rule highways and the NCR can barely keep the lights on, the Brotherhood has the power to make a true difference, and yet they choose not to. They They could actually create a brighter future if they chose to work with the right people or factions, and they could even police it in ways that make sense for the greater good. But their fear drives a knife of corruption into the heart of the arid landscape. They choose to live in bunkers behind force fields and turret systems, convinced they're humanity's last hope, while doing nothing to save it. They are the definition of willful irrelevance. An order so obsessed with the sins of the past, they refuse to build a future. In a world where every tool could save a life, they'd rather let you die than trust you with a wrench.
Wiping out the Brotherhood of Steel is one of the most intense decisions you can make. Obviously not because the Brotherhood is without fault, but because of Fallout 3, and because the Mojave chapter is barely surviving by the time you find them. And what I mean with Fallout 3 is that a lot of people started the Fallout series with number 3. It was the modern game and the first time millennials had a chance to get into the series. In that game, the Brotherhood is treated like absolute Boy Scouts, the literal good guys of the wasteland. Obsidian being clever and also faithful to their roots goes back to making the Brotherhood more gray. And those Fallout 3 players, just like me, are sad to watch the Brotherhood go up in flames. Anyways, back to New Vegas. After their war with the NCR, the Brotherhood went into hiding in Hidden Valley, sealed off in a bunker with limited numbers and no real outside influence. They're not expanding and not really a direct threat to anyone at the moment. Their focus has shifted from enforcement to survival. The Brotherhood's isolationism and tech hoarding tendencies make them hard to work with, and they've refused to adapt to the changing world around them. But their purpose has always been to keep pre-war technology out of the wrong hands. They've seen what unchecked tech can do, what caused the Great War, and their official stance is that they want to stop that from happening again. But that's not how it really is. But that's for a different topic. If we keep with their official viewpoint in mind, eliminating them doesn't stop a rising threat. It removes one of the last factions that still remembers the old world and acts with long-term goals. Choosing to exterminate them during quests like Still in the Dark or For the Republic Part 2 means killing everyone inside the bunker. That includes Elder McNamara or Harden, Paladins, Initiates, and unarmed scribes. Some never leave the bunker. Others aren't fighters. There's no option to broker peace or convince them to leave the Mojave, unless you've taken the steps to ally with them through a diplomatic route. Other than that, your only choice is to wipe them out room by room. This choice strengthens House, the NCR, or Yes Men by removing a potential counterbalance. The Brotherhood may be limited, but they're one of the few groups in the wasteland that can match the firepower and knowledge of the major powers. Once they're gone, there's no faction left to challenge how advanced tech is used or who gets to access it. What makes it even worse is if you have Veronica as an ally. You just straight up blow her whole family up, or murder them. Whatever is floating your boat for that current playthrough. To play devil's advocate, one could say it's a good thing because the Brotherhood only wants to hoard the tech to keep for themselves, and thus they're bad and deserve to die. All of these videos are perspective. One person's morality trash is another person's treasure, or something like that. Wiping out the Great Khans holds more weight than the Brotherhood in my opinion. They're less world conquering and more like a society. After the Bitter Springs massacre, where the NCR nearly destroyed them, including non-combatants, they've retreated to Red Rock Canyon, broken and directionless. They're not raiding towns or expanding their reach. They're just isolated and trying to figure out what their future even looks like. Leaders like Regis want change. He sees no future in violence and is pushing to reshape the Khans into something sustainable, something beyond their legacy of blood and chems. When you meet him, the Khans are loosely aligned with Caesar's Legion, but the connection is thin. They aren't true believers, they're just desperate, and Caesar offers land and purpose, but only so he can throw them at the NCR as cannon fodder. If you take the time to talk to their leadership, Papa Kahn, Regis, even some of the younger members, it becomes clear they're looking for a way out. You can convince them to cut ties with Caesar and step away from the war entirely, and even move on to start fresh outside the Mojave. These peaceful outcomes are fully supported by dialogue and quest options like Oh My Papa. Also saying that quest title is a bit awkward if you were wondering, yes. Choosing to destroy them is about ignoring all the alternatives. You attack a tribe that's fractured, hesitant, and willing to change. You kill off people who have already suffered major loss, and who this time weren't fighting back. Regis, Melissa, and other younger Khans represent a possible shift away from violence, but none of that matters if you decide to wipe the slate clean with force. Doing so repeats history. The Bitter Springs massacre left scars on the Khans that still shape their worldview. If you lead an attack on Red Rock Canyon, you're not stopping a war. You're continuing the same pattern of violence that nearly erased them before. The difference now is that the Khans aren't even resisting in the same way. You're targeting a sad shadow of what the Khans used to be. I'm not even saying that in a bad way either. It's because they have been reduced to this that they're finally starting to change their cultural views on raiding and chems. A revolution is on the brink, and you're basically crushing that. If the Kahns are wiped out, the ending slides state that their legacy ended in fire and they'll be forgotten. Their culture, flawed but trying to evolve, is gone because you chose to end it. And with it goes a piece of the Mojave history, one that could have gone a different direction if you'd let it. Siding with the Omertas means supporting one of the most violent and exploitative groups on the Strip. They aren't just another casino crew running shady deals. They're traffickers, torturers, and executioners. Before Mr. House brought them in, the Omertas were known as the Slitherkin, a tribe that lured in travelers, drugged them, and either killed them or enslaved them for entertainment. And that mindset never went away. At Gomorrah, sex workers are kept in line with chems and violence. Debt collectors use beatings and murders to send messages, and anyone who talks ends up buried in the desert. In the quest How Little We Know, you uncover their real plan, Plan B, a Legion-backed operation that involves smuggling weapons and chlorine gas into the Strip. Their goal is to assassinate Mr. House, or whoever's in power, gas the casino floor, and seize control of the Strip in one move. It's about wiping out everyone in their way and turning New Vegas into a territory ruled by one of the most brutal crime syndicates in the region. Going along with this, either by staying silent or even helping them, means signing off on a terror attack that could kill thousands of civilians. Even if you take out Big Sal or Nero yourself, that doesn't really fix anything. You don't really shut down the torture chambers or free the trafficked workers. You just clear the way for someone else to take over. Maybe even Caccino, who's only slightly less psychotic. The power structure stays intact and Gomorrah keeps running the same way it always has. You do get clear alternatives though. You can expose the plot and help Caccino stop the coup, and you can reduce the body count without handing power to another sadist. Choosing instead to enable, ignore, or directly support the Omertas shows your focus isn't on helping anyone. It's about gaining influence through whatever means keeps the Strip profitable for the people on top. Whether you swap out one boss for another or back the entire operation, the outcome will stay the same. Gomorrah keeps running on abuse, and you helped keep it that way.
You look positively famished. We simply can't have that.
As with many things in the Mojave, on the surface, all is well, including the Ultralux Casino, which is one of the most pristine and sophisticated locations in the desert. A gleaming temple to luxury, art, and high society, it's run by an elite group known as the White Glove Society, a wealthy, well-dressed faction that prides itself on etiquette, refinement, and exclusivity. Did I mention it has a cool pool too? This place is paradise. But peel back the velvet curtains of the society, what we find beneath the polished manners and pristine white gloves, we see something far more baleful. A history of cannibalism. The White Glove Society wasn't always the highbrow elite it pretends to be. A community that didn't just tolerate cannibalism as a way of life, they celebrated and fully endorsed it. They believed that eating human flesh was the ultimate indulgence, a mark of sophistication and power, a decadent tradition handed down like fine wine or family heirlooms. They were basically and are the Illuminati of New Vegas.
The White Glove Society has only just made itself known to the public, of course, but our pedigree was established over generations. Were we always so refined? I'd be lying if I said yes.
Eventually, they realized their taste wouldn't fly in polite society, it only worked in the shadows of grains of the sand it sprouted from. So what did they do? Well, they rebranded. The White Glove Society was born. They changed their image, cleaned their clothes, put on fancy masks, and most importantly, publicly renounced cannibalism. But not all members were content with the new identity. Enter Mortimer, a high-ranking member of the society who still longs for the old ways. To him, their cannibalistic heritage wasn't a shameful past to be buried. It was a symbol of refinement, superiority, and tradition. Mortimer believes that cannibalism can return, even thrive, if it's repackaged for the modern world. And so he begins to plot. In the quest ironically named Beyond the Beef, the courier uncovers Mortimer's horrific plan. Kidnap an innocent man, cook him, and serve him to an unsuspecting banquet of elites, essentially reintroducing human flesh to the White Glove Society without their knowledge. He believes that once they've tasted it again, once they've been reminded of its elegance, they'll accept it back into their culture willingly. This isn't just about mere appetite for human divinity, and it's deeper than tradition. Mortimer's plan is about manipulation and a complete disregard for human life. But can we blame him? All he's ever known is that life is tossable, evident by the bombs that took so many souls before his deception. And this is where the evil lies. Sure, cannibalism itself is pretty twisted to begin with. But in the cold, calculated way it's being reintroduced as a fashion statement, it cranks the egregious act up a notch. The victims aren't even enemies. The innocent man is just that, innocent, so he's not even a threat. They're people who don't know they're on the menu. Mortimer's plan is surgical, executed with a fork in one hand and a wine glass in the other. What makes the White Glove Society creepy, aside from those weird masks, is how polished their evil is and how quiet it whispers. The society acts with a smile on its face. They wear tuxedos while preparing human remains like fine cuisine. It's a commentary on how cruelty can hide beneath wealth, manners, and elite status, and it's reminiscent of the Bohemian Grove, which, if you get a chance, you should YouTube since it's a real-world representation of how elitism acts behind closed doors. I'll be honest, I had no idea Sierra Madre was an actual place. I shouldn't be surprised considering New Vegas with the Nellis Air Force Base, Lake Mead, the Strip, Zion, Prim, and almost everything else is based on real-world locations. But unlike every other location in the series, Sierra Madre is downright creepy from the get-go. Begin again. That's the message we keep on hearing. A beacon calling desperate souls with promises of wealth, salvation, and a fresh start. So who wouldn't want to come here after roaming the empty bitterness of the desert? But what lies beyond the signal isn't hope. It's a mausoleum, a trap-laden tomb ruled by obsession, haunted by greed, and dripping with poisonous ambition. The Sierra Madre was once the grandest dream of a pre-war industrialist named Frederick Sinclair. A man so wealthy he didn't build a casino for profit, he built it for control. Envisioned as a fortress against the chaos of the outside world, the Sierra Madre was sealed tight, airtight, and self-sustaining. Sinclair believed that if he could create a perfect place, he could protect everything: his money, his legacy, and most importantly, the woman he loved. As with anything love-based in the series, we should expect nothing less of tragedy, at least at this point. That woman was Miss Keys, a famous actress. But their story wasn't a love affair, it was the tragedy we'd expect to find, at least in a place like this. Sinclair designed the casino to keep her safe. What he didn't realize is she was actually being manipulated by Dean, a smooth-talking lounge singer who planned to rob the place blind. Before the heist could happen, the bombs fell and the war began, and the Sierra Madre sealed itself shut, just as designed. But instead of a sanctuary, it became a prison. What makes the Sierra Madre so evil isn't just the security systems, the toxic red cloud, or the ghost people who roam the ruins. Nor is it the difficulty in which we have to navigate this dastardly place. It's the fact that the entire place was built on paranoia. Every hallway is laced with traps. The speakers whisper surveillance. Doors lock not to keep danger out, but to keep you in. It's a shrine to control, wealth, and possessiveness taken to their final apocalyptic form. And at the center of it all is Father Elijah, a former Brotherhood scribe who found the Sierra Madre decades later and became utterly consumed by it. Obsessed with unlocking its secrets and seizing its endless supply of gold, Elijah turns the casino into a vault of death. He kidnaps the courier, straps an explosive collar to their neck, and forces them into a deadly game with 3 other captives. Each of them is broken, traumatized, and forced to cooperate or die, all the while happening in a maddening maze. It's a twisted puzzle orchestrated by a man who sees people not as allies or threats, but as tools. Elijah doesn't just want the gold or wealth. He wants dominion and power like so many before him. The Sierra Madre's security systems are unhackable. It's lockdown eternal. In his mind, it's the last true power in the world, a fortress where he alone can decide who lives and who dies. He's not seeking freedom, but seeking ownership of resources, of lives, of the future. The evil of the Sierra Madre stews in its design. It makes you question what happens when fear of loss turns into obsession, when love turns into possession, and when survival becomes a weapon. It's a place that feeds on your greed, lures you into the promise of treasure, then traps you forever in a cage you didn't realize you walked into. And even if you escape, the message of the Sierra Madre lingers, saying, begin again. But here, beginning again means surrendering your past and your freedom. Any place that strips you of freedom has to be evil, right?
Massacring the Kings, whether for the NCR or Mr. House, means wiping out one of the Mojave's few self-governed communities. Freeside sits between NCR territory and the New Vegas Strip, kept alive by scraps, pretty much. The followers of the Apocalypse run a free clinic out of the old Mormon fort, and the Kings act like local peacekeepers, handing out water and pushing back against chem dealers. It's rough, but it works. And then turning the area into a war zone doesn't bring the stability one might hope. It just kills the people who are already hanging by a thread. If you follow the NCR's hardline path through King's Gambit, things get ugly quick. After siding with Ambassador Crocker and then following Colonel Moore's version of the plan, you can escort NCR troopers into the King's headquarters and help them kill everyone inside. No negotiations, no diplomacy. The quest literally tells you to assist in the massacre. Most of the Kings aren't seasoned fighters, they're just street kids with light weapons or sometimes nothing at all. Mr. House takes a different route to the same outcome. Even if you broker a temporary truce between the Kings and the NCR, House labels the Kings as foreign sympathizers and sends his upgraded Securitrons into Freeside. If the Kings refuse to leave, which they usually do, they get gunned down. House doesn't ask questions, and his idea of progress involves wiping out anyone who doesn't fall in line. Even if you only reduce tensions without a formal agreement, the Kings eventually push back against House's growing control, and the robots will kill them anyways. The people being targeted aren't raiders, legionnaires, or organized criminals. They're poor locals just trying to survive. Erasing the Kings means replacing community-led efforts with outside military force. Under the NCR, Freeside gets curfews and checkpoints. Under House, it becomes another surveillance zone patrolled by the machines. Either way, the followers' clinic and any hope of local recovery are pushed out. Both routes have peaceful alternatives. You can negotiate a ceasefire for the NCR or talk House into backing off by keeping things informal. Choosing violence ends badly for pretty much everyone in Freeside. In the end, killing the Kings and their community doesn't make the Mojave better. Freeside stops being chaotic, but only because there's no one left to fight back. Mr. House is the Strip's last living link to the pre-war world. A 261-year-old engineer sealed in a life support pod beneath the Lucky 38. His networked mainframes forced disarm codes into 59 incoming warheads, sparing Las Vegas when the bombs fell. He spent the next 2 centuries building the Securitron army and the dome that shields the Strip today. Ending him isn't something I would really call a showdown. You clear a few checkpoints, lower the sarcophagus, crack the sill, and the outside bacteria will finish the job in a year or so. Or you take Nephi's driver to his head, whatever fits your fancy in this specific occasion. House's goals reach beyond the casino profits. He plans to feed Hoover Dam power into orbital factories and eventually crewed spaceflight, arguing that humanity needs a new technological horizon. He bankrolls your resurrection, offers a cut of Strip revenue, and directs his toughest demands at corporations and armed factions, not Freeside's drifters. Also, this is not to argue that there aren't a myriad of things that House is doing wrong or believes, because there absolutely is. It's honestly pretty tough to argue for him on this one, but there is a possibility that House would have made things better. His vision is pretty capitalist and authoritarian, but at least he has a vision. It's better than the Legions, maybe. Pulling the plug collapses the House always wins instantly. Securitrons drop to autopilot and New Vegas slips to NCR bureaucracy, Legion rule, or a shaky yes-man republic. Disabling rather than killing him only slows the process. Once the pod seal breaks, infection ends his life within a year, leaving that same power vacuum. We don't really have long-range thinkers like Mr. House. Killing him will cause massive disturbances in the post-apocalypse force. Maybe it was for the better though in the end, but it's going to take a lot of hardship and time to see the fruits of that labor. It's really about unplugging a bedridden visionary for the sake of a quicker payday or another flag over the Strip.
Hold it right there. Don't you move. How the hell did you survive that bombardment?
Out in the irradiated wastes, past the skeletal husks of the Mojave's past, is a hidden community behind a deadly wall of artillery fire. Nellis Air Force Base, home of the Boomers. Approach them and you're met with explosive hostility, literally. Mortar shells rain down on any traveler, merchant, refugee, or NCR soldier who dares come close. They don't ask questions and the game doesn't give you warnings aside from the sounds of incoming artillery shells. The Boomers are descendants of Vault 34, which was a vault obsessed with munitions and weapon stockpiling. When they emerged generations ago, they carried that obsession with them, along with the deep distrust of the outside world, and rightfully so. After settling in the old Air Force Base, they decided to embrace one philosophy above all else: total isolation at any cost. And the cost has been human life.
You have to keep in mind that you're our first contact with the outside world since I was barely a woman. Seclusion has kept us safe, but the world around us is changing.
What makes their behavior so troubling, so twisted, isn't that they're defending themselves. It's that they've made paranoia a virtue and turned lethal force into policy. It doesn't matter who approaches Nellis or why. I mean, a starving family, a wandering trader, or even a peaceful ambassador. They'll all be blown to pieces without ever setting foot past the fence line. To the Boomers, this isn't cruelty, it's simply survival. They've raised generations on stories of betrayal and violence from the outside world, teaching their children that every outsider is a threat or savage until proven otherwise. They believe they're preserving purity, peace, and heritage. But in truth, they've created an echo chamber of fear, backed by brutal force. This is the classic paradox of power. The more they arm themselves against imagined threats, the more hostile and unapproachable they become. In their quest to keep their way of life safe, they forfeited empathy, sacrificed diplomacy, and replaced community with artillery. Even when the courier finally breaks through, dodging bombs and navigating a literal gauntlet, they find a community not of monsters, but of ordinary people. Curious, polite, even friendly. But it begs the question, how many innocent lives were erased by their guns before someone survived the barrage? Probably a metric shit ton. The Boomers force us to ask, is fear of the outside world a justification for killing indiscriminately? Does tragedy from the past give someone the moral right to destroy anyone who might approach in peace? Their xenophobia isn't loud or theatrical, but it is generational and deeply ingrained, which is a theme we see a lot in the Fallout universe. And that's what makes it so dangerous. Evil, in this case, it's born from fear, nurtured in isolation, and fired from a howitzer at anything that dares to get too close.
That's exactly right. You're very knowledgeable for a Sav, an outsider.
We hope you enjoyed covering some of the evil shenanigans in New Vegas, and we look forward to bringing you a Fallout 3 coverage soon. Remember guys, enjoyed time is never wasted time, and we'll see you in the next.